Have you ever felt a deep, unsettling sense of self-loathing and wondered where it comes from? Not just a passing regret, but a fundamental belief that you are, at your core, flawed, unworthy, or broken. We often blame ourselves for this feeling, as if this hatred is a personal failing, a moral weakness we must conquer alone. But what if this pain isn't your creation? What if it's a relic, a ghost from a past you can barely remember? Gabor Maté presents a devastatingly beautiful and painful paradox. The child who was never accepted for who they are must learn to become someone they are not in order to be loved. And that rejected, authentic self, that becomes the target of all their future rage. This is the great silent wound. Your self-hatred is not a personal choice. It is the body's memory of having to fracture itself to survive. It is the price of admission you paid for a love that was conditional. You were taught, in 1,000 subtle ways, that your true feelings were too much, your needs an inconvenience, your natural exuberance a disturbance. So you had to exile those parts. And now you wage a civil war against yourself, attacking the very emotions and needs that make you human. You are haunted by a ghost, and you are both the hunter and the hunted. But who or what created this ghost in the first place? The answer lies not in your choices, but in a biological imperative so primal, it shaped your very nervous system. This fracture is not a moral failure. It is a biological survival strategy. Gabor Maté roots this profound self-estrangement in our earliest, most vulnerable years. As infants, we are utterly dependent on our caregivers for not just food and shelter, but for the mirroring of our emotions. Our developing brains require a tuned, loving connection to feel safe and real. But when that connection is ruptured by apparent stress, trauma, absence, or even well-intentioned but conditional approval, the child faces an impossible choice. As philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre might frame it, we are forced into bad faith, sacrificing our authentic being to preserve a necessary relationship. The child's brilliant, adaptive mind makes a calculation. If my true self causes this disconnection or rejection, then my true self must be bad. The hatred begins not as malice, but as a desperate, life-preserving compromise. We internalize the environment's expectations until they feel like our own voice. This is what Carl Jung called the shadow, the parts of ourselves we are compelled to repress and hide from the world to be accepted. But as Jung warned, we do not conquer our shadow by caging it. We only make it a darker, more powerful enemy within. Our culture, obsessed with performance and perfection, becomes a megaphone for this inner critic, celebrating the polished persona while the authentic self withers in shame. This is the hidden psychological architecture of your pain, a brilliant adaptation that has outlived its purpose, now turned against you. But if this war was programmed for survival, what is the devastating cost of continuing to fight it? The consequences are not merely emotional. They are written into the very fabric of your biology. This internal war is not contained within the mind. It is a silent, physiological storm. The body, as Maté reveals, keeps the score of this self-betrayal. The constant stress of policing your own emotions, of suppressing authentic needs to maintain a facade of acceptability, triggers a relentless cascade of cortisol and adrenaline. This is the hidden tax of self-hatred, a nervous system perpetually braced for an enemy that is, terrifyingly, itself. The consequence is a profound disembodiment, a retreat from the gut feelings that signal truth, from the heart's yearning that signals desire, because to feel them is to risk encountering the very self you are taught to annihilate. This isn't just a personal tragedy, it's a cultural epidemic. We see its fingerprints everywhere. In the relentless drive for external validation, in the burnout of striving for a perfection that never satisfies, in the addictions we use to numb the pain of a self we cannot bear to inhabit. We become prisoners of a cognitive loop, a confirmation bias, endlessly seeking evidence for our own unworthiness, while dismissing any proof of our inherent value. The ultimate consequence is a life lived in the passive voice. Things happen to you, emotions overwhelm you, and you are a character in a story written by someone else's expectations. You are exiled from your own existence. But if this is the cage, then where, precisely, is the key? The rebellion does not begin with fixing yourself, but with a radical and counterintuitive act of treason against the very rules that built the prison. The rebellion begins with a single heretical act, ceasing to see your self-hatred as a problem to be solved and starting to see it as a pain to be understood. This is not about fighting the internal critic, but about turning toward it with a curiosity so disarming it loses its power. As Viktor Frankl, who found meaning in the depths of Auschwitz, taught us, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our freedom. Your rebellion is to inhabit that space. It is to look at the voice that says, "You are not enough," and ask, with genuine compassion, "Who taught you that? And what were you trying to protect me from?" This is the radical shift. You stop trying to evict the inner critic and instead offer it a chair. You listen to its frantic warnings not as truth, but as a distorted loyalty to a child who needed to adapt to survive. You begin to grieve not for the person you think you should be, but for the person you were never allowed to be. This is the ultimate treason against the conditioning of your past, to grant amnesty to the exiled parts of yourself. It is to reclaim your biology, not through force, but through the gentle, persistent act of feeling what you feel and needing what you need without apology. This is how you dismantle the prison, brick by brick, not with a sledgehammer, but with an unwavering attention that says, "I am here, and I am not leaving you again." And in that reclamation, you discover that the final, most powerful truth was hidden not in the struggle, but in the surrender to a reality far more profound. The ultimate truth, the final revelation that redefines everything, is this: your self-hatred was never hatred at all. It was love, a desperate, misshapen, and heartbreaking form of love. It was the only way your younger self knew how to protect the fragile, authentic core of you by agreeing to hide it away from a world that felt unsafe. The critic, the loathing, the relentless drive, these were not your enemies, but the loyal guardians of your own spirit, employing brutal tactics because they knew no other way. They were love that had to wear the mask of cruelty to perform its duty, survival. This realization is the paradigm shift. It dissolves the war entirely, leaving in its place a profound and grieving compassion. You see that the path forward is not to defeat these guardians, but to thank them, to tell them their watch is over, that the battle they were enlisted for ended long ago. You are safe enough now to begin the journey home to yourself. This is not about becoming someone new, but about uncovering who you always were before the world told you to be otherwise. It is the reclamation of your own tenderness. So the question that remains is not, how do I stop hating myself? But the most ancient and poetic question of all. After all this time, after all this survival, will you finally and gently allow yourself to be loved? If you've struggled with self-hatred or know someone who has, I'd love to hear about your experiences in the comments. Don't forget to check out my other videos on mental health topics, and let's continue the conversation there.